This story starts with Kanye West buying a pristine Tadao Ando designed beachfront home in 2021. Kanye ripped it apart, stripping it of windows, plumbing, electricity, turning a livable work of art into an empty shell of raw concrete. He gave up on the project, listed the house for sale in 2023. He lost something like $40 million when it finally sold. Then fractional real estate investment group Belwood Investments swoops in and begins an effort to completely restore the iconic home back to what it was before Kanye got his hands on it. We've talked about this story a couple times here on the channel in the past. This is something that's been dragging on for years now. I've had conversations with the guy that Kanye hired to remodel this house. We've interviewed the new buyer of the house who's doing the renovations right now, but there's been a development in this story and it has somehow gotten even more dramatic than it already was. See, the current owner, Bo Belmont's plan was always to buy this place, fix it up, and then relist it for sale once it's finished, and then hopefully sell it for a massive profit at the end of the day. Bo, of course, has faced a bunch of headaches with this house, starting with the meticulous and precision remodel that he needed to pull off here. Then we had the Malibu fires come through this area earlier this year, which put his $30 million investment and all of his neighbors' homes at risk. And now he's saying that he got bait and switched by an out-of-state buyer who put the property under contract 5 months ago, but just walked away from the deal. Before we get into the weeds on who this new buyer was, what his plans were with the property, how much Bo stood to make if this deal actually went through, and all of that, let's rewind the clock a little bit for anybody watching who didn't see my previous videos on all this. First and foremost, to understand why this house even matters, it really all goes back to the original architect, Tadao Ando. Ando is not your everyday architect. A lot of Ando's works are in Japan, in museums, churches, cultural centers, stuff like that. Only a handful exist in the United States, and even fewer residential homes exist here. That brings us to Malibu, though. How in the world did Tadao Ando get hired to design a house in Malibu? Well, in 2013, financier Richard Sachs, who's a Wall Street veteran, hired Ando and then ultimately finished a 4,000 square foot, 3-level beachfront house designed by Ando and executed by Los Angeles firm Marmel Radziner. The owner Sachs lived in it for years. But fast forward to 2021 and Kanye West, fresh off his divorce from Kim Kardashian, pays $57.3 million to buy this house off market, off of Richard Sachs. At the time, it was one of the most expensive residential transactions California had seen in years. And for Kanye, it seemed like a perfect fit. He's always had this fascination with architecture and with interior design. So for him, owning a Tadao Ando wasn't going to be just owning a house. Like, it was a status symbol. Here's where the story pivots, though. Most people, after buying a house like this, would just throw some furniture in it and preserve it and move in, but Kanye did not do that. He stripped it down, floors, drywall, plumbing, glass, electrical systems. He tore it all out. Nobody was exactly sure why Kanye did this, but after this house was gutted, it seemed like Kanye had gotten distracted and moved on with his life, which means the house sat with no glass or protection, exposed to the elements and ocean air, just slowly rotting away. By late 2023, the house hit the market again. Remember, Kanye paid $57 million, and his initial listing price at first was $53 million, but after a while, he didn't get any bites, so he dropped the price to $39 million. It's kind of funny, the house was marketed actually with the original listing photos of what the house looked like before Kanye tore it apart, but anyone who came to see the house in person, the reality in writing was on the wall, which was that anybody who took this thing off Kanye's hands, they had their work cut out for them. By the fall of 2024, even after the 2 price drops, it seems like nobody wanted the liability of owning this house. That, though, is when a company called Belwood Investments came into the picture. Belwood is led by a guy named Bo Belmont. He's a developer who's been experimenting with this crowdfunding of property investment, where instead of a single billionaire or hedge fund writing the check to buy this house, Belwood pulled money from hundreds of smaller investors to buy the deal. Belwood used this style of deal to buy Kanye's old house in September of 2024 for $21 million. This was a massive discount from the $57.3 million that Kanye paid for the house just a few years prior. They did the right thing and they brought back Marmol Radziner, the same Los Angeles firm that had executed Ando's plans the first time in 2013. Almost right out of the gates, Belwood made progress on the project, and by early 2005, framing and systems were going back into the house. Permits were active, the project was moving forward. Here, though, is where this story takes yet another interesting turn. As construction ramped up, Belwood listed the property for sale for $39 million. They figured that if they could attract a buyer now, then that buyer could step in and help pick out the finishes and even take ownership before the full renovation was finished. And as luck would have it, their strategy worked. In March of 2025, a developer, Andrew Mazzella, signed a contract to buy the old Kanye house for around $30 million. On paper, it looked like Belwood had pulled off the perfect deal. They bought the place. Just 5 months later, they resold it for a $10 million profit. All of his roughly 500 investors on the deal were going to walk away with a nice payday. So yeah, Belwood accepted the offer. They paused construction on the house because they were given the message that Mazzella was a developer himself and he was going to finish the project, so there's no reason for them to keep spending money if the buyer is going to finish the job. If you Google the buyer's name, you'll see he doesn't seem to be a Malibu regular. He's a developer and a commercial fisherman with business ties in Montana and Alaska. The contract was signed in March 2025, and they were supposed to close within just a couple of months. But the closer the deal got to that closing deadline, the more cracks that appeared in this deal, and before you knew it, the whole deal had fallen apart. From Belwood's side, the narrative is that Mazzella didn't have the cash. They say he came in talking a big game, promising to close fast, but when it came time to fund, the money wasn't there. Mazzella's version of events is different. He insists that the money was there, but due diligence uncovered some things that he didn't like. Belwood had pitched about $8.5 million to complete the restoration, but Mazzella's team, looking at the stripped shell and the scope of work still outstanding, thought the number was low, maybe by millions of dollars. At this point, the buyer did not walk away from the deal. He did what most buyers would do if things are starting to feel a little shaky. He tried to renegotiate the price. Reports say that Mazzella first floated a new price of $19.5 million, which is far below the $30 million in the signed contract. Belmont called it insulting, and then apparently Mazzella came back with a second offer, $27.5 million in cash. Still below contract, but closer. Belmont, though, for whatever reason, said no again. And that brings us to today. The deal between Belwood Investments and Andrew Mazzella is dead. Mazzella is telling reporters that this transaction didn't go through due to just a mutual agreement, but Belwood is saying that it's due to the buyer's failure to perform. Either way, no matter which way you look at it, the deal's not happening. There were some insults that were flung back and forth, but as far as that house itself is concerned, construction as of now is still on hold. Months have gone by with no progress, although construction, they say, is set to begin again soon. The infamous Kanye house has officially went back into active status with a nearly $5 million price cut, now asking $34.9 million. As far as I'm concerned, this is just a simple deal gone south. It's kind of entertaining to see bickering from both sides of the transaction, but in reality, the buyer and seller just couldn't come to an agreement. This is something that happens all the time. What stands out most in my mind is that a traditional developer oftentimes can weather delays, they can shift money around, or they can sometimes just cut losses and walk away. But the interesting element of this deal is that there's still hundreds of small investors behind it, all who are going to expect immediate movement and progress despite this bump in the road. At $330,000 per month in carrying cost, every quarter this project drags on is another $1 million lost. The original numbers were buy this place for $21 million, put $8.5 million into it, and sell it for $40+ million, which, yeah, that sounds attractive. But now with this new listing price of $34.9 million on the other hand, the margins on this deal seem to be getting pretty thin. What happens next could be one of three outcomes. Scenario one is that Belwood pulls off a refinance to reduce the overhead. They finish the restoration and they list the completed house in 2026 for $40+ million. Scenario two is that another developer or investor swoops in, somebody who's willing to take the project midstream at that $34.9 million price. They roll the dice on the completion and gamble that Ando's name and Malibu's scarcity will reward them in the end. Or scenario 3 is that investors grow restless, pressure builds, and at some point, carrying an unfinished house at a loss becomes unsustainable, and Belwood cuts this price further just to exit the deal. Even though there's a lot of drama surrounding this house and this story, it's still a Tadao Ando. It's still in one of the best locations in the world. So one thing seems for sure, I don't know who's gonna finish this house, but based on its concrete form, I'd say it's gonna stay standing until someone does. And at that point, someone other than Kanye can call 24844 Malibu Road their trophy home. I'm looking forward to that day that this story ends. I'll see you guys next week.